Mark Reynolds was a man in his late 40s who once had everything going for him. A promising architect, with designs that made headlines, and a wife who believed in him when no one else did. But life doesn't always follow the blueprint we draw up. One mistake changed everything. Mark had overseen a project that went terribly wrong. A structural flaw that caused his firm to lose millions and his reputation to crumble overnight. Clients pulled out, his company pushed him out, and before long, his marriage followed the same path. He blamed himself for it all. Now, instead of drawing skyscrapers that touched the sky, Mark lived in a dimly lit apartment that barely saw the light of day. Unpaid bills piled high on his kitchen counter, liquor bottles rolled on the floor, and the once vibrant man who loved creating beauty now spent his nights staring at the cracks in his ceiling. He ignored calls from old friends. He let his phone go silent. He never opened the curtains. To him, isolation wasn't a punishment, it was a choice. He told himself he deserved this, that the world had moved on and left no place for him. The man who used to sketch buildings that inspired hope now nearly threw his last sketchbook into the trash. But something in him, something fragile and faint, made him tuck it away into a drawer instead. He didn't know why. Maybe because part of him wasn't ready to let go completely. And so, Mark lived in the prison he built with his own two hands. Not one made of steel and stone, but of regret and silence. But what Mark didn't know was that someone new had just moved into the building, and she was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. Mark thought the darkness was the only company he had left. But what happens when light comes knocking at his door? Her name was Emma Carter. She was 28, full of life, and always carried with her an air of optimism that seemed too bright for a city that often felt so gray. She had just moved into the apartment next door, carrying boxes and laughing with herself as she struggled with the weight. Mark noticed her once, through the crack in his blinds, but quickly turned away. "Not my business," he muttered. He wanted no part in anyone's life anymore. But Emma, she was different. She noticed things. The way Mark never left his apartment. The way his mailbox overflowed with unopened envelopes. The way the light under his door stayed on late into the night. One evening, she knocked on his door. Mark opened just slightly, suspicious, his voice rough. "What do you want?" Emma smiled, holding out a plate. "Hi, I made extra food tonight. Thought you might want some." Mark frowned. "No thanks. I don't need charity." He moved to shut the door. But Emma didn't flinch. She simply smiled and said, "That's okay. I'll try again another time." And then she walked away, humming softly to herself. Mark stood there, staring at the closed door, confused. People usually stopped trying after the first rejection. Why didn't she? Days passed, and each time Emma saw him, whether it was checking mail, walking up the stairs, or standing silently by his door, she greeted him with warmth. A wave, a kind word. Sometimes, she even left a cup of coffee by his doorstep without saying a word. Mark would grumble and throw the cup away, but deep down, he had begun to expect those moments. As much as he tried to deny it, a small part of him waited for that knock, that smile, that little reminder that someone noticed him. He didn't admit it out loud, not even to himself. But something was shifting. Mark had chosen isolation as his shield. But kindness has a way of slipping through the cracks. It was a cold, rainy night when Mark's world felt heavier than ever. The power company finally followed through on the overdue bills. His electricity was cut off, and his apartment sat in complete silence, the only light coming from the faint glow of the city outside his window. He sat on the couch, bottle in hand, staring into the darkness. Memories haunted him, the look on his wife's face when she left, the disappointment in his colleagues' eyes, the shame that followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. For the first time in months, Mark felt the crushing weight of loneliness pressing harder than ever. He whispered to himself, "This is it. This is what I deserve." Then, a knock on the door. "Mark, are you okay?" It was Emma's voice. She had noticed the blackout in his apartment and brought a small box of candles. Mark didn't answer. He wanted her to go away. But something in her tone, gentle, patient, almost pleading, made him rise from the couch and open the door. There she stood, holding the candles, dripping wet from the rain, her eyes filled not with pity, but with genuine concern. "I thought you might need these." This time, he didn't turn her away. He stepped aside, and for the first time, Emma entered his world of darkness. They lit candles together, the small flames flickering against the walls, chasing away the shadows. Mark found himself talking. Not much at first, just fragments. But soon, the dam broke. He told her about his failures, how he ruined everything he had built, how he believed no one should care about him anymore. His voice cracked as he admitted, "I don't even recognize myself anymore." Emma listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. When he finished, she simply said, "You didn't lose everything, Mark. You're still here. And that means there's still something to build." Those words, they lingered in the air, heavier than anything he'd heard in years. For the first time, Mark allowed someone into his darkness. But words alone can't rebuild a broken life. The next morning, Mark looked around his messy apartment. For months, it had mirrored his state of mind, cluttered, broken, abandoned. But something about Emma's words echoed in his head. There's still something to build. He started small. He picked up bottles from the floor. He wiped down the kitchen counter. He opened the blinds. For the first time in years, sunlight hit his face. Then, almost without realizing it, Mark pulled open the drawer and took out his old sketchbook. His hands trembled as he flipped through unfinished designs. Some pages were smudged, others torn, but the lines were still his. They reminded him of the man he once was. He began to sketch again. Not skyscrapers this time, but small things, benches, garden layouts, even a child's swing set. His pencil scratched the paper like an old friend he thought he'd lost forever. Emma, noticing his change, invited him to a local community center. "They're redesigning a playground," she explained. "They could use someone with your skills." At first, Mark resisted. "I'm no one anymore," he said. But Emma pushed gently, "Maybe they don't need someone. Maybe they just need you." Reluctantly, he went. What he found there stunned him. Volunteers of all ages, working together, hopeful faces, children running around with excitement about the new playground. They looked at him not with judgment, but with gratitude when he sketched out a design idea that fit perfectly. For the first time in years, Mark felt purpose stir within him. He was reminded that his talent hadn't disappeared, it had just been buried beneath his pain. Mark had taken his first step out of the shadows. But could he truly rebuild the life he thought was gone forever? What started as one small project turned into something bigger. Mark began visiting the community center regularly, offering his skills wherever they were needed. His designs brought structure to their dreams, and their gratitude reignited something inside him. Word spread. Soon, an old colleague reached out. "Mark, I heard you're designing again. We could use your touch on a freelance project." He hesitated at first, but Emma encouraged him. "Why not give it a try? You have nothing to lose." And so, Mark dipped his toes back into the professional world. One freelance job led to another. Slowly, the man who once lived in shadows found himself sketching late into the night again. This time, not out of regret, but out of passion. He reconnected with people he thought he had lost forever. Old friends who were happy to hear his voice again. Even a tentative phone call to his sister, with whom he hadn't spoken in years. The conversation was awkward at first, but when she said, "I've missed you," something inside him broke, and healed at the same time. One afternoon, standing in front of the completed playground he had helped design, children's laughter filling the air, Mark turned to Emma. His eyes were misty, his voice trembling. "I thought I chose the darkness," he admitted. "But really, I was just waiting for someone to remind me there was light." Emma smiled, her eyes glistening. "You just needed someone to believe in you again." And for the first time in a long time, Mark believed in himself too. Mark's life was no longer defined by what he lost, but by what he rebuilt. But what lesson does his story leave for us all? In the final part, discover the powerful truth about kindness, and why even the smallest gesture can change a life forever. As Mark stood in that playground, the sound of children's laughter echoing around him, he realized something profound. The world hadn't abandoned him. He had abandoned himself. And it was kindness, Not force, not judgment, not pity, that guided him back. Emma never demanded he change. She never told him what to do. She simply showed up day after day with patience, with gentleness, with small reminders that he mattered. And that was enough to help him believe again. Mark's story is a reminder for all of us. Sometimes, the darkest prisons aren't built with bricks and bars. They're built with guilt, regret, and silence. But kindness has the power to slip through the cracks, to reach people even when they've closed every door. Because kindness doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes, it's as simple as a smile, a knock on the door, a plate of food, a cup of coffee left quietly behind. And those small acts, those quiet reminders, can be the very things that pull someone back from the edge. Moral of this story: kindness doesn't always break down walls with force. Sometimes, it just waits, patient, gentle, until the darkness has no choice but to let the light in. Mark's story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can pull someone out of a darkness we may never see. So if you've been inspired, take a moment today to show kindness to someone. It might just change their life. And if you believe more people need stories like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with a friend who needs hope. Because kindness shared is kindness multiplied. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.